She didn't speak when she stepped onto the training grounds that morning. Maybe that's why no one understood who she really was. Maybe silence made her look small. Or maybe the reason was simpler. They weren't ready for someone like her. Not yet. What came next would shake the foundations of everything they believed about skill, legacy, and what it truly meant to carry history in your hands. It began under heavy September heat, the kind that clung to skin and made breaths feel heavier than they should. Blue Harbor training ground stretched out like a concrete desert, bunkers, towers, ballistic test lanes, old wind flags that snapped in unpredictable gusts. It was a shrine to precision, built for the best of America's marksmen. Yet for 8 straight weeks, not one of them had hit the 2,900-meter target at the far end of the range. 6 snipers stood lined up that day, sweat darkening their uniforms, rifles gleaming with polished pride. Lieutenant Marcus Webb was the quiet center of that elite circle, 12 years of service, 2 silver stars, a reputation most soldiers envied. He carried an M82A1 Barrett, outfitted with digital readouts and ballistic software that did half the thinking for him. But even he had failed that shot, all of them had. So when she walked through the gate, jeans, hiking boots, long dark braid bouncing slightly against her back, they didn't see a threat. They didn't see a rival. They didn't see a student or peer. They saw a mistake. And then they saw her rifle. A wooden rifle, dark, hand-carved, weathered by time, metalwork reflecting decades of use instead of months. It looked like a relic pulled from some dusty museum shelf, not something meant for this place of steel and algorithms. Webb laughed under his breath, unable to help himself. "You lost, sweetheart. Reenactments are downtown." Davis chuckled louder. "That thing fought at Little Bighorn." She didn't react, not even a blink. She moved with a calm Webb found irritating, a kind of grounded stillness that felt like an insult to the tension sharpening the air. She walked straight to Captain Atrix and handed him a folded document. No words, no explanations. Atrix read the paper once, his jaw tightening. "She's cleared, Ayanna Crosswind, authorized for today's challenge." The mockery evaporated. Webb stared stunned. "You're kidding." "I don't kid about range protocols," Atrix said. Then her eyes met theirs, deep brown, steady. No fear, no arrogance, just something unreadable, something old. "Winchester Model 1886, she said softly. "Modified, 4 generations old." Miller scoffed. "Lady, that antique won't hit 300 yards. This is elite marksmanship, not a county fair." "500 says she doesn't get close," another sniper muttered. She ignored them all. Ayanna set a small leather pouch on the firing line. No laptop, no ballistic computer, no tech at all. Just a cloth, a wooden case holding 3 ancient cartridges, and that quiet confidence that made Webb even more uneasy. "You understand the parameters?" Webb asked, folding his arms. 2,900 meters, variable wind, heat distortion. It's a science. We use computers because no human can read wind this far." Her fingers brushed over the rifle's wooden stock with a tenderness usually reserved for something living. "My great-grandfather hunted buffalo with this. Crow Reservation, Montana. He taught me something important." Davis smirked. "And what's that?" "Technology helps," she said, lifting the rifle. "Tradition teaches." The range fell silent. She lay prone in the sand, not in the rigid regulation posture they'd been trained to use, but something looser, more organic, like she wasn't lying on the earth but sinking into it. Webb exchanged glances with Davis. This was going to be embarrassing. Then she scooped sand with one hand and let it fall. Once. Twice. A third time. Webb frowned. "What is she?" "She's reading the wind," Davis murmured, suddenly less amused. "With sand," Webb snapped, but the certainty in his voice wavered. Ayanna adjusted her wooden bolt, exhaled deeply and went still. Not sniper still, something deeper, older, like she was listening to the land breathe. 15 seconds passed. No movement. Then, a single sharp crack, clean, crisp, nothing like the thunderous boom of their modern rifles. Every head snapped toward the distant target. 3 seconds of silence. The radio crackled. Target hit dead center. Webb's stomach dropped. 8 weeks. 0 hits. 6 elite snipers. Millions in equipment. And a woman with a wooden rifle made a perfect hit on the first shot. She stood, brushed sand from her clothes, reloaded as calmly as if she were preparing for a casual afternoon hunt. Technology helps, she repeated softly. Tradition teaches. Then she slung the rifle over her shoulder and walked off, footprints the only evidence she'd ever been there. Miller exhaled shakily. What the hell just happened? Webb didn't answer, couldn't. His pride, his training, the foundation of everything he believed, cracked. Because that wasn't luck. Luck didn't exist at 2,900 meters. An Iona crosswind was something else entirely, something he couldn't explain, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit. That night sleep refused to come. Webb sat before his laptop, digging through whatever scraps of information he could find. But Iona crosswind barely existed. Birth certificate, hunting license, nothing that explained what happened on that range. Nothing that explained her eyes, her steadiness, her certainty. Davis joined him at breakfast, trying to brush it off. Savant maybe, beginner's luck, a fluke. That wasn't luck, Webb muttered. She read the wind with sand, technique, old technique. Miller slid into the seat across. I asked around. Trix says her family has military history, real old stuff, Korean War scout units. Webb's mind churned. Scout, tracker, marksman. Knowledge like that wasn't taught in schools. It was inherited, passed through hands and blood and generations. At 1400 hours, Captain Trix called a briefing. Iona stood by the window, wooden rifle leaning against her leg like a loyal dog. Crosswind has accepted a second challenge, Trix announced. Moving targets, variable conditions, timed sequence. Webb bristled. What's the point? One good shot. One impossible shot, Trix corrected, and we need to know if it's repeatable. Iona's gaze didn't waver. What are the stakes? The room paused. Civilians didn't negotiate with military officers, but she asked anyway, voice steady as stone. I want access to old military records, she said. Korean War scout programs, native participants. Trix's expression tightened, recognition flashing in his eyes. Those records weren't just old. They were buried. And suddenly, Webb understood something. Iona Crosswind wasn't here to prove she could shoot. She was here to reclaim something stolen. Something forgotten. Something the military never expected to see again. In tomorrow's test, it wasn't a challenge. It was a beginning. A storm rolling toward all of them with quiet, unstoppable force. She stood alone on the range before sunrise, the sky still bruised with night, the wind cold and sharp from the ocean. It would have made most shooters nervous. Uncertainty always did. But Iona Crosswind simply stood still, her hand brushing the barrel of the old rifle like she was listening to it breathe. Why wasn't she anxious? Why didn't she pace or fidget or rehearse? Because something inside her knew. This test wasn't about proving she could shoot. It was about proving something they didn't want to believe. The first light broke over Blue Harbor, turning sand into molten gold. The 6 elite snipers were already lined up, shifting uncomfortably in their gear. Webb tried not to stare at Iona, but she made it impossible. Still as a statue, yet somehow more alive than any of them. 5 moving targets, each farther than the last. 15 minutes. One miss on the clock, and you were done. In 3 years of running this course, no one had hit more than 3 targets. Webb himself only managed it twice. At 600, Atrix raised his hand. Begin. Webb stepped up first. His Barrett hummed with data, wind, humidity, temperature. The scope felt like a second brain whispering instructions into his vision. The first target appeared at 800 meters. Clean hit. Then 1200. Hit. When the 1800-meter target rolled into view, the wind shifted violently and the round skidded along the target's edge. 3 out of 5. Respectable. Expected. One by one, the others took their turns. 2 hits, 3 hits, none past Webb's mark. Then Ayanna walked to the line. She didn't kneel immediately. Instead, she crouched near the sand again and placed her palm flat on the ground as if feeling the heartbeat of the earth. "What is she doing?" Davis muttered. "Listening," Miller whispered, though he didn't know how he knew. Ayanna stood, loaded a round with a soft metallic click, and lay prone, not in regulation form, but in that strange, natural shape that made it seem like the ground itself formed a cradle around her. The first target moved. She fired instantly. Hit. Second target. No hesitation. Hit. Webb's pulse thudded harder. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was intention. Then came the 1800-meter target, the one that stole his breath earlier. The wind gusted in unpredictable bursts, swirling sand at their feet. Ayanna watched the grass along the edges of the field, her head tilting slightly. She didn't look through her scope yet. She was waiting for something only she seemed to sense. Then finally she fired. Hit. The snipers murmured in disbelief. Fourth target at 2400 meters. The wind was chaos now, gusting so hard Miller's hat blew off his head. Ayanna didn't blink. She lifted her face slightly, tasting the air. Taste, Webb whispered to himself. What is she? Crack. Hit. A humming silence settled over the range. The kind of silence that meant something was happening no one could explain, yet everyone understood was bigger than them. Then came the last target. 2,900 meters. Moving. The shot none of them had hit in 8 weeks. The shot that had started everything. Ayanna loaded her final round, slow and reverent. Not nervous. Not rushed. Intentional. The target began its slow, jagged track at the far end of the range. She didn't wait for it to pause. She fired while it was still moving. The world froze. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The radio crackled. Target 5 hit, center mass. The wind died. No one spoke. No one breathed. Ayanna stood, catching the spent casing in her hand like she'd done it 1,000 times. She walked back toward them, passing Webb as if this were nothing more than a daily ritual. Sometimes tradition understands what machines can't, she said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. Almost. The others stared at her like she'd cracked open the sky. But Webb felt something else. A shift inside his chest, something uncomfortable. Something unwelcome. A truth he didn't want but couldn't ignore. Because for the first time, he